Hi, this is your host Swapnil Bhartiya and welcome to State of Energy. And today we have two guests from Vattenfall Distribution AB, Harald Klomp, Hub Manager, and Vincent Glinevich, Lead Data Strategist. Vincent, Harald, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Yes, glad to be here.
Thanks for joining us. Now I want to learn a bit about the company. Can you tell us, what is Vattenfall Distribution all about?
So Vattenfall is a Swedish utility company with both generation, transmission, or distribution, and also wholesale. It's mostly located in Sweden, but also in Denmark, Germany, Netherlands, and also the UK.
I work for the distribution company, so owned by Vattenfall, but we are operate independently because we own and operate medium voltage grids that cover about 50% of Swedish population. About 3/4 of the industry is connected to our medium voltage grids, and we connect both industry customers but also generation to our grids, and we connect all different companies, not only Vattenfall generation, but also competitors to Vattenfall. So that requires us, of course, to be impartial when it comes to because we have an obligation to connect everybody to the grids. We have to treat everybody equally. And then we also own local distribution grids, low voltage grids, and there we connect about 1/4 of the Swedish population.
You folks joined LF Energy last year. Tell us why you joined and what projects are you bringing or what projects are you working on in the open source space?
The new vision of Vattenfall is to power climate smarter living. And for this, we have two choices. Either we only focus on our customers and we have a specific impact, or we try to reach beyond our normal business. And from this, joining these kind of initiatives like Linux Foundation, everything we do could have a much greater impact in fossil-free within one generation, for example. So that's one argument for why we choose to join Linux Foundation Energy. And the other from the distribution company is also that there are very natural monopolies, so there's no real competition or competitive advantage to gain in not sharing. Actually, it's only better for us if we share and if we manage to reach standardized solutions to help the entire society become better at being electrified. So it's more like we're actually responsible for it, and where we see we can help and help everybody and help ourselves at the same time, and it makes sense to join.
Can you talk about what kind of open source or efforts are there at Vattenfall?
We're quite new to the we're foremost a power grid company, distribution, and of course Vattenfall as a company is a power utility. So software is not something our core business. So it's more software is more a necessity rather than a business. But also I think more and more companies see the value of developing software together, especially when it's not your competence and when there's maybe not a solution to buy from the market, or the software the software that's available might not exactly suit your needs. We're still a niche market. Maybe globally there's a few hundred companies like us, so it's a small world. So we need, there's not always software that we can buy for our specific needs. So, and I think this is an example which we're developing now, is looking at grid capacity calculations, where we are looking at now trying to develop this together with other utilities, and there we both get the advantage of when it's open source, it can develop faster, and also we can validation of the methodology is easier, because we can share the code with other utilities. They can check our calculations, the way we have implemented the algorithms, and they can give feedback and even patch the code and upload a improved version, so we can much quicker get to the desired end results by doing this collaboratively rather than doing this on our own. But that said, we are quite new to doing open source development, so we're really here, and that's also of course the advantage with using the Linux Foundation energy, that Linux Foundation is an expert on open source software development. We are experts on our business. So by joining forces with somebody who knows software development, really, that's a win-win.
The distribution business, we are very used to sharing and being open through standards. So for a very long time, we've been engaged in Vattenfall, especially in the development and refinement of technical specification, technical requirements, and standards. The problem usually is the implementation of standards that then is very slow. And we see open source as a way also to speed up the standardization process, not maybe through the let's say technical or intellectual way, more like from a practical point of view. We can create de facto standards, not just really well refined standards, but standard requirements that everybody can read and understand and refine. So working together for standard solutions more than just standard specifications.
What role do you see open source plays in industries like that you operate in, where it makes it easier for folks? As you said, it has to be practical implementation of standards, not just specifications on paper.
Yeah, but it also becomes to agree on different methodologies, so how to calculate, for example, like we're doing in the grid capacity map, like we're doing capacity calculations. So how do you come up with the number X? This is the amount of headroom available in this grid location. So to have a industry agreed methodology, and then of course and then implemented in code that we can use.
And the problem with international standards is that they are to become standards, we need an agreement internationally, which may take a long time. And right now, with electrification going at such a pace, we cannot maybe wait for the standard to be completely written and set in stone before we start to look at implementation. So we also see this kind of open source path as also a way to maybe speed up the standardization process. It could be just generate a discussion, create a project where people can get active and engage, and through that reach a better agreement, because we see, okay, the values there, let's agree on something is better than disagree on something.
Now I want to go a bit deeper into the grid capacity map. Tell us, what is this all about?
Yeah, so there's a need to understand what is the available headroom on different locations, both for feeding. When we talk about location, it's an electrical grid somewhere that you want to connect either generation or consumption. And then the amount of available capacity in that location is then, of course, important when you want to either connect generation or production. And in the background, there's a lot of calculations required to come out to derive at that a number of available capacity in that location. And then, of course, it's all dependent on what other connections are happening. So if there's X available in one location, there's Y available in another location. It all depends who connects first, what will be then left for the others to connect. But to come up with a nationwide or grid-wide map calculations of the grid capacity, and to develop a methodology, that's really been the goal of this effort that we've been doing now. And then, of course, comes the question, okay, what do we do with this information? But that's still not decided what we do once we have these capacity calculations. How will we'll use it internally, if we'll use it maybe externally, that this is to be decided. And I guess that's going to be basically up to each grid company that uses this methodology to decide. And you can also, it depends also what you feed it with. It can be either, capacity right now, maybe next hour, next day, in 10 years. So there's also a time aspect when it comes to capacity calculations that you need to consider. But the methodology should be the same.
Basically, the electrical grid is very meshed, and we have very well working processes for a reactive workflow. So if a customer asks us, can I connect there? We have the tools and the work processes to be able to answer that pretty well, and we will do all those checks to make sure that the connection is secure, it's not causing any problems for the other customers. There is we can make sure that if we grant you access to that connection, you will get everything you're asking for. So, and this is the way our customers used to ask. It was very slow process, and industry will take a long time to build. So we had time to maybe reinforce the grid at the same time that the industry was being built. Nowadays, there are a lot more industries joining, some with very quick ramping time. For example, charging stations. We can develop a charging station within a few, maybe weeks or months, fully operational. So all that's needed is a connection. But then we might not have time to reinforce the grid at the same time. But they might not be as picky as we think they are. They might be willing to relocate their request to a place where there is space, where there is faster access to capacity. So for us, the grid capacity map is a way to show and a way to be more proactive in the dialogue with the customers to help them find space in the system. We know the system, there are a lot of information that might be pretty sensitive. We cannot share how everything is interrelated, interconnected, but we can help the customer find when there is more place to better leverage, to better use the system that we build for everybody, and to allow them to start their electrification journey faster, instead of waiting for a connection that may take 3 years in place A. They can do it in place B in 1 year instead.
Yeah, maybe as a background, we anticipate the last 40 years we have sort of been a steady state, so very little growth. But now in the next 15, 20 years, we anticipate a doubling of the amount of grid connections to our grid. So a substantial growth ahead of us, and then we also need to try and move, if possible, to try and accommodate those connections in places where we already have capacity or where we can easily add capacity, rather than places where it's maybe very long lead times. So we can and it's all driven by, of course, the will to move away from fossil fuels, and the methodology to get rid of fossil fuels is usually to electrify transportation, industrial processes. So that's driving the demand for grid connections.
We are also moving towards solar. You also mentioned EV chargers, which is also that by putting a solar roof or battery in my house, I am also becoming a producer. I am putting electricity back in the grid. So whole way the grid used to work was the flow of electrons was in one direction. Now my provider buys electricity back for me and gives me credit back, which also means the way grid operate is also changing. So does this grid capacity map also kind of emerge to solve this problem also, because the way we are consuming and distribution changing?
The goal was to cover both generation and consumption, so demand and generation. Then the first step, the grid capacity map, we don't look at all the fault management. So it's a snapshot that might not be perfect nor complete, but the goal is indeed to cover both, to help by being proactive, help the connection of production, both wind power, solar power. It could be acceptance, so penetration, PV penetration, or demand. So yes, both.
Who are potential users of grid capacity map?
So there's the internal user, like of the open source code, will be utilities that they would run the code on their own data in order to generate a grid capacity layer that they can show on a map. So that's the internal user, the user of the tool. But the beneficiary of the tools are the users of the grid, which means new companies that want to have an early indication on where and whether or not it's possible to connect. It might be the government trying to create like electrification roadmap. In Sweden, for example, the government would love to have capacity estimations along the highways to understand where we want to suggest or where we would want to finance electrification hubs. It could be municipalities trying to, can we afford to attract a new energy intensive businesses, or are we just shooting ourselves in the foot? So there are both. There we have internally, it's utilities that want to be more proactive, and they will be able to use these open source software code to extract this knowledge from their data. But it's to be proactive towards the electrical needs of the utility users.
What is the state of this project right now? How mature it is? Can, as you said, grid, utilities can start using it? And second is that what are the things that you're planning for future?
So we've had a first proof of concept through R&D just to look at whether or not it is feasible. We have leveraged a lot of open source libraries just to test that. So that's the first release that's right now on the Grid Capacity Map Linux Foundation GitHub. So it's not production worthy, but it's, I would say, a great documentation for a developer to develop a production worthy or a near production worthy tool. And this is what we are actually currently doing. So we provided this code to a developer to make it more suitable for production needs. So what's being released is a pre-production, more like alpha release, and what's in the pipe right now is more like a beta, much closer to production release.
If you look at Linux Foundation or LF Energy, it's already kind of very, very active community of this sector. So what kind of developers you would be like interested in, hey, come and join our project? So if I say, hey, call for action, who would you invite to join and contribute or test the project?
So I would invite other grid companies to join. that have a need to do grid capacity calculations for their customers.
I will also invite the grid calculation software providers to because what we're doing is more or less an API wrapped around an already existing grid calculation or open source grid calculation tool. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. The grid calculation is the way it is, and it's standardized calculations that have always been the same for a long time. What we're trying to do is find new ways to or automate some calculations to provide useful information to our customers. So both utilities that might provide data or new use cases that we want to capture in this grid capacity map, and also people with strong power flow analysis knowledge that can maybe help improve the calculations, the quality.
Harald, Vincent, thank you so much for taking time out today and talk about this project and how it's solving a much larger problem. As Vincent, you talked about, the fossil fuel, move away from that and move more towards, the sustainable sources of energy. So thanks for sharing those insights, and I would love to have you back on the show when we have more working and mature, version of this project ready. But thanks for your time today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, and we look forward to be back.